At an hour and 56 minutes, Wonka seems to be not as long as most of the recent films that we've been experiencing lately. But I have to say, it felt every minute of 156 years. Well, maybe not that long. That's quite hyperbolic, but you get the point. And I saw a movie, so you don't have to. And this one's a toss-up, so here we go! First and foremost, as I mentioned, we're looking at an hour and 56 minutes, nearly 2 hours of your time, 120 minutes of your day. And with previews, you're going to go over 2 hours. Usually you have 10 to 15 minutes worth of previews, although in the offering, there wasn't anything that I was even remotely looking forward to, including the terrible CGI in the new Aquaman Lost Kingdom, which I have to go see so that you don't have to. But on that note, I will say that this film is headed for a very dismal $39 million in domestic box office open here in North America. We're also, at the same time, looking at a combined global of about 151 million. Now, there's an asterisk next to that for a reason. The reason? Well, it already opened elsewhere before it opened here. So it had kind of a bit of a jump start a week before we got it here in the United States. Well, and Canada, for what it's worth. I will say that this film was unexpected. Not by me, but by many of the folks that are in the audience, and probably many of the people who've already seen the film. Because this is a pure musical. It is not a traditional film. It was certainly not advertised as a musical, and I think a lot of people will be unprepared for that if they're not watching critics or someone like me or have read reviews, because it certainly wasn't presenting itself as a pure musical. One of the things it does do is it tilts all the time off of the very successful Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory film from way back when. The movie from our childhood, or at least the years that we were growing up, was something that a family member could put in and trust us to watch it without a whole lot of supervision. And this film in some ways is reflective of that, but not enough. And certainly it does try to trade on that classic's better name. Now, direction for this film is by Paul King. And creatively, this was very well directed, if you could give it some positive praise. He does a great job of keeping it moving straight forward, straight ahead, without a whole lot of callbacks to the past. There was a lot of show, don't tell. There were some moments of exposition, but for the most part, they all came with a visual representation of a backstory you probably would need, especially when it comes to the Oompa Loompa. As far as pacing, though, this film is incredibly uneven, and it starts off with a bang that will remind you of a particular film, Pirates of the Caribbean. It might also remind you of Doolittle and a few other things if you are familiar with those points of reference. There's a lot of things borrowed from other properties that you, if you're paying attention, will recognize. And there's nothing wrong with borrowing from other places with some visual ideas. Cinematography was very well done. And I have to say the colors really pop. The palette that was chosen is brilliant at times and very much suits the period that they're trying to portray. One of the things that I think won't get enough credit is Timothée Chalamet. He actually is passable in this role, although he is a character that could be tangentially related to Gene Wilder's character of Willy Wonka in an Elseworlds story, far, far away from something that would have been an origin story, which is what this film was supposed to do. And at times, believe it or not, he seems to be feeling, when he's playing the role, like an imposter, trying to live up to somebody else's performance. And it's really a shame at times, but you can see the predicament that he was stuck in. And I'm not sure what the director told him about how he had to play this character. He also looks incredibly frail, and I know that this film has been in the hopper since 2021 as far as when it was shot. That also concerns me about Dune 2, but he's going to be wearing a lot of desert suit stuff, so I don't know. We'll have to see how that thing turns out, but we don't have to worry about that till next year. Calla Lane is a new actress, at least to me, and she is a wholly new character, something that was never referenced in any of the previous literary material put together by Roald Dahl. The interesting thing about her character is it's quite believable, and I believe that this actress has a huge future in acting. She is really, really talented. The biggest problem with her character, though, is that because it's a wholly new character, it was invented and inserted to maybe fulfill somebody's production ideals based on maybe some metrics that they have to meet in order to get films made nowadays. That's not necessarily the greatest starting point, but as I said, she overcomes that in the film. But there's a lot of that in this movie, and we may touch on that here in just a moment. Now, beyond the ensemble cast, which is quite large and very talented, I would say everybody here is a very capable actor or actress. You have some wonderful performances, but none better than, of course, the brightest spots of all, which were, of course, going to be Rowan Atkinson and Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant really delivers. In fact, if they had elected to do a proper origin story following the lore that was created, we would have ended up with Hugh Grant basically being a leader of the Oompa Loompas in a very fun way. As it was, this is kind of a very interesting thing and does lead down or towards a path that could intersect with the original film, but I doubt it, because tonally this was set in, well, a very different direction, and the levity at times was more than overpowering, which really wasn't in the original film. So do with that what you will. And at a danger of sounding like some other folks who talked about this film, I'm going to say this film is better than it deserves to be. And you may have heard me say that previously with the most recent Hunger Games film, the prequel to that. Prequels have a hard time. Okay, they're trying to live up to the things that came before. It's one of the reasons why there was so much controversy around the Star Wars prequel trilogy. And when you try to lean into something and bring a origin story or something to the table, you have a lot of challenges because there's already a lot established in front of you. And at times you have no choice but to try to borrow from that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But from beginning to end, this film becomes better and better as you go. If you can stomach the first 1.5 acts, if you get halfway into the second act, where you're actually introduced to Hugh Grant's Oompa Loompa, I think from that point forward, this movie does improve. And that's saying something, because I'm trying to say nice things this time. And as I mentioned before, this film does suffer from a lot of the modern audience garbage that, well, makes everything that's in this film feel forced. Maybe everything's not forced, but it does feel that way. And that's another big problem with films now. They've created a situation where the audience is always anticipating, maybe it doesn't have to be a forceful, over-the-top allegory, but just by adhering to a lot of these directives from the folks that we really shouldn't be going to for moral advice, I think a lot of people are still going to struggle with that with this film, which is disappointing, because had they not leaned so heavily into that, I don't think that would have been a problem. Now, interestingly enough, there is a film coming out with Mark Wahlberg, which features him and a dog and a team of people that are racing, and I believe it's directed by George Clooney. And for what it's worth, that film feels like it's very authentic, real, and doesn't have a lot of that garbage inserted into it, which means I may be looking forward to it. And like I said just a few moments ago, the biggest obstacle that this film will be looking to overcome, at least as far as earnings go, is the fact that it was so poorly marketed. I think the trailers misled a lot of the audience and perhaps turned them off. Had the audience known going in, especially during a holiday period, that this was a musical and more whimsical, maybe it would have been more acceptable and something that people would have been happy to get behind. But again, I would also argue that despite the young lady's appreciation for somebody like Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong, maybe his audience isn't as big as you need it to be, especially since I would say that the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory films are more oriented towards a male audience, and this film certainly wasn't. Now to some of the harsh truths, because there are some. This film at times feels overwhelmingly soulless, very much a corporate committee kind of film. I don't know how else to say that. I've heard other people fall in line with that same line of thinking. But the soullessness you encounter is intermittent. It's not all at once, and it kind of falls into certain spots. In fact, these moments are easily identifiable. You're going to see them coming because they're going to lean into the old soundtrack, the old musical bits that were part of a little bit of that imposter situation that I was talking about with Chalamet's acting, but it's the film broadly that actually projects that at times. And again, rather solo. And I think that the biggest reason that you would feel that way is because those songs are repurposed and they're done so poorly. I mean, talk about standing of the corpses of better men who created the material that you're now trying to exploit. Because oftentimes with these films, especially prequels, they do feel like exploitations. I don't think Paul King intended it that way. I don't think the writer did either. But at the same time, you had a pretty high bar to clear and you just didn't do it. And we'll get around to the rating in just a moment. And I will have just one small caveat here. Allow me that, which is that the one repurposed song that works in this film is right at the very end. One of my personal favorites with an entirely new verse, but familiar melody. And it was repurposed at a point when the character played by Miss Lane, Noodle, absolutely needs it. It represents the ending of the film in such a wonderful way that you will actually forgive them for doing what they did to the song, because it's a really nice moment. And I did have one surprise, something I wasn't expecting. Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong can actually sing. I'm assuming. I mean, it looked like he was singing. Maybe he was lip syncing. I don't know, but it looked like and sounded like it was him. Of course, computers do amazing things now, so maybe not. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And congratulations, you have a nice voice and a ton of ability. Now, when I do these first reactions, I don't do any spoilers, and a lot of you appreciate that. If you are looking for spoilers and you want a sense of this film, well, you can see an entire film synopsis right from Wikipedia, because it basically goes scene by scene through the film. You will understand the film beginning to end, and it looks very much like something you would see if you were being told about this film, like a pitch. It's helpful if you want to go in informed, but it does have all the spoilers, so, roulette for you. I don't know. And last but not least, and thank you for sticking around to the end of the review, this film is finally getting my rating. This film is 5.5 out of 10. That's right. That's the best it could muster. Just slightly above middle of the road. Average. It's a C student. And if you're looking for a star rating, which is what I'm more comfortable with, it's about 2 stars. Again, not something that's overwhelming. And that puts it kind of squarely in the middle of the road for the films we've been offered over the course of the last couple of years. And why do I say it that way? Well, because we haven't had a whole lot of really good films, and most of the stuff we're seeing is bad. So everybody's barometer, whatever measuring instrument that you want to use, has been compromised, contaminated by all of the garbage that's been out there. In fact, there's so much garbage that was released just in this year alone. I'll be actually doing the top 10 worst movies of the year for the very first time right here on this channel next week. On that note, if you're trying to kill time, you don't mind an average movie and wasting $8 or more, this film could be worth a trip to the theater. But it's really more of streaming fare, and that isn't good for Warner Brothers, because this month will be radically disappointing. And I believe they're also releasing, or somebody is releasing, the remake of The Color Purple as a musical, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I have a feeling that, at least as far as Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and Wonka, Warner Brothers is in for a very rough December. On that note, I truly appreciate your patronage, I appreciate your subscription, and I appreciate your membership. If you're any or all of those, I truly appreciate you. So, if you have any thoughts or comments about the film or anything else that I could cover, be sure to make those down in the comment section down below. And, as always, be sure to take care of yourself and take care of others. Happy holidays. And until next time, see ya!